So just as diverse as Twitter is and how we elevate diverse voices and give them a platform every day, we want our company to represent the same things.
So diversity best practices actually measures what is happening within an individual company, and our goal is for the Inclusive 100 to make sure that we can get at least 100 companies in the marketing and advertising space to participate.
What inspires me most is that change is too slow, and that people have to roll up their sleeves and actually make things happen.
I'm E.B. Moss from MediaVillage, which is the knowledge exchange for the media industry. But we're also the home for advancing diversity. Its goal? To make sure the content we consume reflects the faces of the real world and that more people have a voice in its creation. In our first episodes, we featured those acknowledged for really moving from advocacy to activism when it comes to D&I at their companies. We gathered them and hundreds of others at the recent Advancing Diversity Honors at a council meeting with 40 industry leaders during CES 2020. That's where Jack Myers and those leaders mapped out a 5-point plan to keep moving D&I forward for our business and for the world. Here's Jack.
Many others in this room, 40 of the senior leaders of the industry, to focus in on how we could scale the initiatives, not only that you've led, but that our industry has surrounding the whole industry, bringing them together under a single umbrella to move the best practices and best principles forward, not just to advance diversity for the sake of advancing diversity, equality, inclusion, which is critically important because it's good for our business.
In this episode, we'll hear from Julie Coppernell of Intel.
My exact title is Global Marketing Strategy for all of our businesses and our brand. And a day in my life, you know, I wake up to what our products are doing, what our customers are doing, where they're going and where they're headed, what's happening globally, and how we should invest our money and what we really want to do looking at all the businesses and all of our goals.
Delana Brand of Twitter.
I am the Vice President of People Experience at Twitter and also Head of Inclusion and Diversity. So my role really is about trying to create amazing workplace experiences for our tweets to keep them engaged, instill a sense of belonging, make them feel seen and heard, all with the intent of trying to make our company reflect our service. So just as diverse as Twitter is and how we elevate diverse voices and give them a platform every day, we want our company to represent the same things.
And Marla Kaplowitz of the 4As.
So my role as president and CEO is to ensure that we are supporting our agencies with their business practices, to make sure that we are helping them as they work with their clients and ensuring that in all aspects of what they do that we can support them to really help their business thrive. So my days look different every day. So I can be working with our talent, equity, and inclusion team on our MAPE program, which is our multicultural advertising intern program. I can be working with our team focused on agency management services and helping business operations and surveys that we do for our agencies, or our professional and organizational development as they're building out training and opportunities for agencies to help accelerate the career path for their talent. It's a lot of different things, meeting with agencies, working in DC to make sure that we are addressing some of the most critical needs. Right now, we're in a coalition focused on data privacy and identifying the need at a federal level to actually create not only legislation, but a data protection bureau within the FTC. So you can see it's pretty varied.
Yes.
But ultimately, it all comes back to one thing, and that is about supporting and championing on behalf of agencies, regardless of whether that's advertising, marketing, communications, the full structure.
We captured some of their specific suggestions for our community and how they personally are taking action. I asked each of them, what would you say is the most important action that we can take as a community and together help advance diversity and inclusion and really move it from advocacy and talking about it to activism? This is what Julie said.
I so appreciate the question because I think the word community gets used in so many different ways, I think, defining it and what it means for your organization. So I've been spending some time trying to define it for Intel, especially for women. How do you build that inter-company community? And how do you get people actually supporting each other in ways that they haven't? I think networking at functions and outside events, that's all great, talking about it, but it's taking action at home, if you will, and taking action locally. So the actions, I think, giving time and space for a community and actually saying, I think it would be wonderful if all of the women at your company got together on a regular basis, really got to know each other so that they could support each other and really stated what their goals were. What did they want to be accountable for and responsible for? Like we want to be accountable for bringing more women into the organization, and then let them figure out how they want to go do it.
Delana really likes the word together and feels that's important.
Yeah, well, I think the key word in your question is together. Like, we've been talking about inclusion and diversity for a really, really long time. And all of us as companies and organizations are trying to tackle this like extremely wicked problem, but we're trying to do it ourselves. And there's not enough industry-wide sort of focus and effort to get all the best practices and get all the amazing thinking and get all the research and all the work that's been done and bring it together and really start to set standards together, to set metrics together, to figure out ways to hold each other accountable. And that's where true change happens. This is too big. We're talking about not just representation issues, but societal issues in terms of how we treat each other and value one another. That's not going to change in isolation, so we really have to partner and work together.
And here's Marla from the 4As.
There are so many agencies and companies that each have their own program, and sharing the best practices and coming together. This is not something that people need to be doing on their own. We don't need to keep reinventing new programs. When you find something that works, people should be open to sharing that. And it's also about making sure that there is a commitment. So diversity best practices actually measures what is happening within an individual company, and our goal is for the Inclusive 100 to make sure that we can get at least 100 companies in the marketing and advertising space to participate. It's free.
Yes.
It's just about providing your data. It does not have to go public with you as an individual company, but it's about making sure that we can benchmark and understand because we need to measure to show that we can have that kind of impact, and we need to be open about the severity of the issue.
One of the research points that came out in the Advancing Diversity Council meeting was that about 70% of young people might come into a job interview or even after they're hired into meetings fairly unprepared. It seems that we need some educational solutions that we can implement and ways to support diverse team members and really mentor young people. I asked first Julie, then Delana, and then Marla how they grapple with that.
I think one of the ways is helping and stating, hey, let's talk about what you could do to prepare for this. Let me sit down and say, hey, why don't you do a presentation on XYZ, even if it wasn't really needed, just to get them the exercise in their hands. And let me give you 3 questions that you could really think about, because there's nothing like that hands-on experience. And I think stating it makes a difference, especially when you're young. You don't necessarily think about those things. You don't know what you should do. So I think being a mentor to somebody and saying, hey, look, we're going to have you come in and do a presentation on a competitive product, something that's even just easy for them to be able to say, we're going to give you that time and we're going to push you through that exercise.
So really empowering.
And assignments, especially when they're young, because I think people think, gosh, you're going to walk into a room and you're going to know what questions to ask. When you're new in your career, you don't have any idea. And you're up against people that have been there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. They know what to ask because they've seen it and they have that benefit. So giving them the questions to ask and letting them go get the answers, then they learn.
I am so inspired by our younger folks and these up-and-coming generations because they're not sitting back and waiting and following sort of the old rules. And I would just encourage them to lean into that, embrace that. I know you get folks from Gen X and my generation and others who tell them to wait their turn and things like that. But timing is everything, and we need their voices, we need their energy, and we need their spirit, and we need their activism to achieve the things that we're trying to achieve. So I just encourage them to get involved and be bold and do that early on so that they can help solution these things.
So this is something that we have found is coming up a lot more frequently. We're getting requests from agencies on call it business etiquette. So we actually have created a whole training that we are offering now to agencies. But we also, for our MAPE program, we have a 12-week virtual training program, and it's not just about learning about advertising and marketing. It's also about understanding business etiquette. What is it like in the professional environment? Because a lot of these students have never been in a business environment before. This is their first experience, and we want to make sure that for those that already have experience that are also part of the program that they may be part of at an agency, that they're not behind and that they actually go into it with the same kind of knowledge. So we do need to make sure that there's some education and some ways that people are prepared.
Finally, we brought it back to each of them. I asked Julie, then Marla, and Delana, what touches each of them personally? What inspires them the most to help advance diversity?
What inspires me most is that change is too slow, and people have to roll up their sleeves and actually make things happen. And I know that a lot of people, especially male executives, say that they have daughters and they want to see it better for their daughters. And I have a daughter, she's a teen, and I also have a special needs son. And I think about, what do you really want them to enter into? So it inspires me to say, let's make it better for them.
So I just heard about a program from Facebook called Mentorship Circles, and I think it's a great way to think about mentorship not just as one-on-one, but how do you scale it? And so they're actually creating small groups, 6, 7 people that are either connected by a function or by a particular desire or an employee resource group, and coming together and having within a 1-year period real focus, and not only just having the mentor actually work with this group, but now you have a peer group of people that can support one another as they're experiencing challenges or opportunities. And that to me is a really interesting way to think differently about it than we have in the past.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of big focuses that really inspire me and get me fired up and passionate. One is I spent an enormous amount of my career, started off as a finance person and evolved into human resources and sort of the people aspect of things. And so also really focused on sort of rewards and compensation. And so the focuses around equality and equity, particularly pay equity, is a passion point of mine, and trying to frame solutions for women and underrepresented minorities to really advocate for themselves so they show up differently and can really get what they deserve from a worth perspective. So that's sort of a personal passion of mine, and that inspires me. And also in the role that I am, have the ability to create programs and solutions so that to hold my company accountable for making sure that we're doing the right things from that perspective. But in terms of inclusion and diversity in particular, for me, I get inspired by the conversations about how we are the same and similar. We spend so much time in the inclusion and diversity space talking about the differences and encouraging people to appreciate the differences and value people that are different. And that's critically important, and that's a part of it. But I have found that people open up tremendously when you can meet them from a common ground perspective and share something that you have in common. You have to get people to listen first and to have a conversation. Those conversations always start when you share some sort of intersectionality. We're both mothers. We both grew up in maybe small towns, right? Or we both like certain activities or sports. those conversations and those intersectionality sort of appreciation for those get you to the point where we can have a conversation about our differences and people start to reframe their thinking about how they value diversity and inclusion. So I like to inspire sameness just as much as I like to inspire the differences.
Do you have an example of a way that you do that?
Yeah. Well, at Twitter, we actually sort of talk about our I&D function and call it ICD, so intersectionality, cultural, and diversity, right? So we are teaching people, we have programs in the organization, day one in flight school, which is our orientation program, where we teach people about intersectionality. On the badges that all of our tweets have, they have ability to put like 2 or 3 things that they're very passionate about or that represent them, and those become intersectional conversations in the cafeteria. People can look at a badge and say, "Oh, I see you enjoy, pop music," or "I see you enjoy, football," or whatever those things are. And so it's just sort of woven into the fabric of how we operate, that we teach people to really appreciate the things that we have in common.
Let me throw you a little bit of a curveball as I think out loud here. How do we overcome the issue of birds of a feather, though? It's almost the opposite. Like, we want to find common ground or a common intersectional element, but it's really easy, especially with social media, for like-minded users to only listen or follow or retweet like-minded users. How do we break down the barriers?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, because that can't be done in isolation, right? So at the same time, you have to be talking about, again, the value and the differences and the importance of allyship in addition to that, right? So yes, make sure that you're supporting and you're connecting with those that you have things in common. But for those that you have differences, show up as an ally. Lend your voice when their voice isn't being heard, right? Make sure that you're promoting and encouraging programs that support people that are different from you in the organization. At Twitter, we talk about with our business resource groups, because people have a tendency to join the affinity group that they connect with, right? So, Twitter Women, or maybe Twitter Blackbirds, or Twitter Able, which is wonderful, because that's why they're there in the organization, to facilitate that sense of connection. But equally important, as an ally, join one where you don't have any connection, and just learn what it means to be in that particular community, so you can take that back and speak on their behalf in meetings or other situations. So both have to go hand in hand together. It's not easy.
It's not easy, but you sound like the woman for the job.
Well, I certainly firmly believe in its importance. This is how we're going to inspire sort of change in the world, us working together to try to solve these problems.
Please listen, subscribe, and share, and keep reading MediaVillage for more emerging details on our 5-point plan to advance diversity.